Hello, my name is Russ Milheim from the Direct. Thank you for talking to me today about the movie.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. It's a very unique, crazy film that you've created here. So I wanted to open up and ask, can you help paint the picture as to how this world fell apart? How did the rapture occur? How did we get to where the movie starts?
Well, certainly the characters in this film, believe that it is a religious rapture, essentially like a Christian biblical rapture, that has, scorched the earth and left like, a handful of sinners behind. Now, of course, this film, you're seeing the distant descendants of kind of what happened. And I think kind of the fun of this movie is slightly trying to unpack that through the beliefs of the characters or what we show you of those. But, but certainly, although, I'm not myself a particularly religious person. I would just lean towards, the biblical rapture for this one. I've always just enjoyed that kind of idea of taking a post-apocalyptic film in a more like theological direction rather than like a literal one where I'd have to, compete with George Miller, which I would never want to do.
Um, so you mentioned that it's been a second since the rapture actually happened. How long would you say? Decades? Are we going even longer than that?
200 years.
Okay.
No, I have a very specific answer for that.
That's
That
fair.
like for the most part, we're not answering any like questions, but you just happened to ask one that I'm like, yep, 200 years.
Yeah.
So and I only mentioned at one point we considered a little scroll at the beginning that said 200 years. And then it was kind of like, do people need this? The fun of this movie is again, like I personally like being kind of intrigued by horror films and not necessarily like knowing where they're going. As long as there is a clear like internal logic and they're not just throwing nonsense at me, which I guess is, the criticism that, we might be inviting here. But for me, I love like kind of not knowing everything and having to kind of piece things together. So I won't, we shouldn't say probably too much on that, but yeah, 200 years.
Well, I'm sure I have plenty more detail-oriented questions for you. So we'll see how
Oh,
much I
well,
can get out of you.
yeah, no, feel free, ask away.
Yeah.
If I feel like it's too much, I'll just pretend I don't hear you and
Yeah.
wander off screen. But yeah.
Now, as you were saying, a more general question for you. Like the movie does hold back on a lot of information for audiences. Can you talk more about the balance of keeping things a mystery while still making sure to offer up, some answers here and there and some context so audiences can follow along or, connect more with the plot unfolding?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is it was really an ongoing kind of conversation with this film that we didn't really, I think, settle upon a total like path until we locked the picture at it. Because obviously on a script level, you're kind of inadvertently explaining certain things that when you see it as a film, you're only seeing like the information of the action and such. So the film is a little more mysterious than the screenplay in some regards. And so, so when we, but we really wanted to lean into that. And our financiers with this, Dave Kaplan and Jason Cloth at C2 were like totally confident. They were just like, go make your weird movie. We trust you guys. Like we just, we like this concept. And they gave us like, frankly, like almost an alarming amount of trust, like to deliver a coherent film, given what our the kind of experiment of this film and what our objectives were. And yeah, and there and like so right now in the film, there's a couple interstitial titles, biblical quotes that do a little bit towards giving you some context, and that wasn't in the screenplay. That was kind of our compromise for like, okay, people need a little more than what we're giving them. But like the fun of a film like Azrael for me is that you don't have to make a movie for like every single person. For some people, it's going to be like too obvious a story because it's just nonstop action. It's fairly straightforward. For some people, they're going to be like infuriated and baffled by it. Ideally, we get more people who are kind of in the middle and are like pleasurably intrigued by it and enjoy it, even if like they're left kind of debating some details.
No, I spoke with Katz recently, and he confirmed that the monsters in the movie are called the Burnt People.
hmm
Can you further elaborate on what exactly they are?
Well, again, this film was actually based on like kind of a recurring nightmare I had over a couple nights, which almost never happens to me. But I was just in kind of a weird headspace, I guess, and I just kept having this weird dream again, which is kind of strange because I'm not very religious, and the dream didn't star myself, so that was all kind of unusual. And and so I had this kind of imagery, and for Evan and I, it was just very much like, okay, we don't want this to be too much like a zombie or too much like a creature. The movement of the burnt people was very important to us, that they still have some kind of like humanity to their motion. And that they don't seem so much like monsters, but as truly like burnt people, who have survived some kind of fire, and are hard to kill in certain ways. And so it was just, we kind of wanted something original but scary. And at a certain point I showed Evan the anime Attack on Titan, and how the Titans kind of like run in that anime, and that was a big inspiration for us because we hadn't quite seen anyone rip that off yet.
Yeah, yeah. So I have some spoiler questions for you. So
Oh, all right.
feel
Spoil.
free to talk freely. We'll make sure to hold all spoiler
Okay.
answers separately. So you don't have to worry there.
Appreciate it.
So I just have to ask the big question. Was the baby that was born the devil himself?
I mean, there's a lot of evidence, seven eyes, but yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't know that. I actually, to be honest, I don't have an answer to that one. I think we would certainly say that the baby is, a kind of antithetical resurrection figure, to like maybe Christ. And so maybe then that would be like the direct interpretation of that, but I actually don't know. It's a good question. Yeah, good question.
My interpretation was it was either, Lucifer, like the devil himself, or it was like the Antichrist.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think either one of those would be like pretty acceptable. I mean, again, we just called it the goat baby. Like,
I like that
because
name
like,
though. Yeah, the goat.
yeah, because then the burnt people, the goat baby, we were trying to kind of always like humanize our creatures, because of the mythology is such that like the morality, shifts in the film. And the goat baby ends up being kind of adorable.
Yeah. Now, the world is filled with people that don't talk. I mean, it seems like that seems to be a worldwide thing. But there is one person in the movie who does speak.
Hmm.
Kind of elaborate on his inclusion, and like, was it a weird, just like he's just one of the few that does still speak? Is that cult very, secluded in its ways?
Yeah, I mean, as much as this might seem like it kind of overcomplicates things, I felt like it was important in this world to show that there were like cultures outside of the one that we were seeing, that like not everyone in this world is just like this religious sect that we're seeing, who've like cut their vocal cords and done all these things. Like so, and by having him speak Esperanto, or actually that actor and I kind of came up with like a bit of pidgin Esperanto, because he's actually Danish, and Esperanto has a lot of kind of Spanishy pronunciations that he didn't like. So he kind of changed his Esperanto, which was perfect for me, because I was like, great, even better. It's like an Esperanto that like only exists in this film. But Esperanto was kind of created a little bit as like a socialist language, as like a universal socialist language. So the kind of notion is he's from some kind of like, I don't know, like farming community that's like found another way to make things work.
Yeah.
And that's why we're one of like the two or three Esperanto language films in existence now, is because if you happen to recognize that he's speaking Esperanto, which only a few people do, but the people that do are like, oh, that's Esperanto. What a strange like thing. And that kind of informs you. Again, it's like giving people enough hints that you can kind of hopefully piece the mythology together, but not spelling it out is kind of the experiment of this film.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Now, I want to ask a quick, unrelated question for you. You also wrote The Guest,
Hmm.
and people have been dying for some sort of sequel to The Guest. So I wanted to ask, have you thought about what that would look like? Have there been any conversations? Where could we be in that process?
Yeah, I mean, the honest truth is Adam and I talk about a guest sequel, like probably like every other week. Like it comes up and we'll just like talk about it for a little bit. Look, a lot of things have changed since we made the guest, and I think we don't really know what that would be, but it is something that we talk about. I mean, I think from my perspective, I'm a little more reluctant than Adam is, just because I'm so I think precious about the fan base that the guest has developed since it came out, where we kind of thought the movie was just a total failure initially, both kind of critically and certainly financially. And since it's gone on to develop this kind of fan base and cult following, I really don't want to do anything to spoil that, because like the idea that a fan of The Guest might have of what The Guest 2 could be that's a hard thing to kind of live up to, what people might have in their imagination about like the continued adventures of Dan Stevens, David, and Micah Monroe's Anna, and so I don't know. It is something we talk about all the time, and I think the thing that I should probably just start saying is like we will only do it if we feel really like we're not going to screw it up and like the circumstances are perfect.
Well, I have faith. I have faith that you guys can get that sequel off the ground, make it something special. Uh,
We'll see. I mean, again, like a 4K DCP of The Guest is like screening next month, and that's like such a I don't know. To me, I'm so grateful that 10 years later people are still watching it. But yeah, I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant to mess with it. Anyway, go on.
Now, last question for you. I'm gonna go with a little broader here because yeah, as we talk, the movie doesn't have any dialogue really. No one's speaking. So, can you kind of just talk about those creative challenges that you had while writing a story where none of your characters could express themselves with dialogue, and kind of the hardest elements of that?
Well, on a writing level, it's not too hard once you just get over the fact that like the script's not going to look like readable. Normally when you're writing a screenplay, you actually try to break up the page a fair amount with dialogue because it's the only thing like agents and actors are ultimately going to read. So, you kind of have to sometimes throw it like if I have like a 3-page action scene, occasionally I'll have a character go, "Ow," just so that,
Yeah.
like it's not so just so people aren't facing a huge block of text. Look, it's just a reality of like, when you have a script, like people are busy. They're not going to read every word. I wish they would. I put a lot of effort into them, but I'm realistic about it. So on a script level, it wasn't that hard. You just describe kind of the events of the film and in ideally a coherent, impactful way. But on a filmmaking level, once Evan and I were actually in Estonia and working on the movie, then we were kind of like, oh, okay, like it, people aren't going to get this. That's when you're translating it to image. Like words on the page can kind of explain some things that like images cannot. So the movie started to get like more obscure, which isn't what we wanted. We wanted it to be quite obscure, but again, it's a very fine balancing act based on kind of our specific vision for this project. So there was a lot of finesse with it. Frankly, when I found out that Samara Weaving had said yes, I kind of stopped worrying.
Yeah, it's a good
Because she,
reason to stop worrying.
well, I mean, it's kind of true. I mean, like, first of all, I was blown away that Samara agreed to be in this film. I mean, we have mutual friends with Radio Silence and stuff, but still, I was like, this was a bold role for someone to take. I mean, we're taking away all her tools. We were filming in Estonia. Like there, I kind of thought there was no way we would get her, but Samara is just a person who's very much down for to be in cool movies and really has a vision of her career that I think is extremely impressive. And as soon as I found out that she had agreed to play Azrael, it was like, oh, well, we don't have to worry about people like not understanding Azrael's like emotions or feelings or thoughts in the moment because Samara will be able to convey that like with her eyes, and that helped a lot, honestly. Like I truly I don't know what this movie would be without Samara Weaving. Like it's really hard to imagine it working.
She is a wonderful actress, and I always look forward to seeing her in whatever film she does next, especially horror. She's like the new scream queen.
I hope to work with her truly for like the rest of my career. It was such an awesome time. Like and I mean and this was not an easy role.
Yeah, except for this
And
film where you couldn't let her scream, so you took away.
Well, the way that Evan and I talked about doing that is she was pretty often kind of screaming on set, and then we would take it out in post because we didn't want people faking like whisper screams because then you wouldn't see the tension in their necks and faces. So a lot of times that like so if there probably is a cut of Azrael where you can hear Samara's like favorite famous scream in like every scene, but then we went back and post and had her like dub in like that's because her vocal cords have been cut.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so and we did a lot of weird research into like how that would sound, and but ultimately, yeah, like she was articulating mostly on set, just that the performance of her like neck muscles would be correct.
interesting, interesting. Well, thank you again for talking to me about the movie. I look forward to the rest of the world getting to see it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
Of course, and I'll look forward to the guest too.
Yeah.
Maybe your next two as well, if you want to add that one to the list.
Oh, geez, yeah, like all the movies that made like no money at the box office.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll figure that out.
All right. Well, thank you very much.